Good afternoon. You're supposed to say good afternoon. Okay, I just wanted to add one thing. I had the honor of being the National Student Symposium Chair a long time ago, when I was young, which was a long time ago. And one of our panelists, so I learned that the Federalist Society is known for having balance on the panels, and we had Ruth Bader Ginsburg that year as one of the panelists. So I wanted to thank Ms. Bauer for joining us today and adding some balance to the last panel. I think it's Federalist Society, one of the great things about the Federalist Society, it's not just like one-sided discussion, it's a discussion. So my own applause for all the people that were here adding balance. So I have the honor of giving the Good Shepherd Award. Lisa, in fact, they asked me to do it and told me who it was, and it's just coincidental that it's a friend of mine. So they say good guys finish last, but not at the Federalist Society. Federalist Society good guys finish first. And this guy is kind of old school. He also goes back to the 80s, joining the Federalist Society in law school in the 80s. Then he moved down to Miami. He got active and helped start the Federalist Society in Miami. He's the lawyers chapter. He then moved up to Palm Beach County, became very involved in the Palm Beach County, or starting a Palm Beach County Federalist Society and working on JNCs and putting people with Federalist Society perspectives in position to become a judge. He himself became a judge, appointed by Rick Scott to the Circuit Court in the 15th Circuit in Palm Beach County. And then during COVID, no coincidence, he was picked for the Fourth District Court of Appeal by Governor DeSantis. I think by now he's realized who I'm talking about. A new tradition, just coincidental, I guess maybe started, in addition to getting a plaque, you get a car and driver, because it's just a coincidence that I'm his ride to get home tonight. So I was told to keep it short, so I will keep it short and then call up the recipient of the 2025 Good Shepherd Award, Judge Edward Artel. What a coincidence, huh? Wow. You want to hold it and take a picture? Okay, we had 5 minutes and I used 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so.
Fortunately, I have no prepared remarks because I wasn't expecting this at all. But I want to say how much this means to me, because the Federalist Society means everything to me. I remember walking in as a first-year Georgetown law student, and I had been involved I was chair of, in Broward County when I was in college, of College Students for Reagan, and I wanted to get involved in something in the conservative movement, and I saw a sign that said, Federalist Society meeting, if you're interested, show up. And I went to that, and it really changed my life. Federalist Society, being involved in it as a law student, and then being able to sort of export that and bring that to Florida after I graduated from law school, has made all the difference in my career. My commitment to the concepts of that I really learned from people like Antonin Scalia and Robert Bork. Textualism, originalism is the most significant concepts that I bring to the bench as a judge. And this organization is the most meaningful organization that really brings to the law what it is to be able to make the rule of law something that is not about a particular result. It's about a particular process. And it's about the process of following the law and enforcing it wherever it leads you, even if that's a liberal result. And that's what we do with originalism and textualism. I want to thank all the people that came before me that's received this award, all the people that have brought this to Florida, in particular Jesse Panuccio, Jason Gonzalez, Alan Forrest, and Frank Shepard. You all have really made the difference in this state, and this award is for you guys. Thank you so much.
And with that, we'll move to our keynote discussion. I'm going to ask Jesse and Sheldon to come up to the stage. And I would introduce Jesse, but I don't think he needs an introduction after the last day of programming.
All right,
Want to open up a water bottle first? You
sure.
ready?
Let's get situated here.
Yeah, here we go.
Sure everything's in place. Well, thanks, Lisa, and congratulations to Judge Artal for that very well-deserved award. I remember when we first met in Palm Beach County, and you were at the Water Management District and ready to help out with Governor Scott and all he was trying to do, and it was very well-deserved. And thanks to the namesake of the award, Judge Shepard, who I think I saw him here earlier today. Hopefully he's here, and I hope those of you who don't know him, how about a round of applause for the namesake of the award. And also I'll just say thanks to Lisa and to Abby and the whole team from the Federalist Society. Another, as we get ready, that we'll have our reception tonight, but just another record-breaking year for us. And it's, every year the dinner's always large, but the lunch keeps getting bigger too. So congrats to all of you who did not take your families to the parks today. You're excellent Federalists and maybe terrible family members, but that's okay. So congrats for being here. So Sheldon, welcome back to the Florida Federalist Society. You came here, we'll get to this, but you were at our very first conference, or maybe the second.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that. But first, I want to say on behalf of everyone here, congratulations on becoming the president of the Federalist Society. I think...
Thank you.
Very well deserved. I and many others, when we saw the news, perhaps earlier than you intended, we're just thrilled about it. So thank you for taking on the job, for being here. I think I want to start out, some of us in this room know you, some don't. You're the second ever president, so certainly your predecessor is someone we all knew and associated with these events in the society. So let's just start with, rather than me reading your bio, why don't you start from your, tell us your origin story, Sheldon. Where do you come from and how did you get here?
I'm just a simple country lawyer from Idaho, really, at the end of the day. I was born in Carbon County, Utah, which is coal country. Made my way to the burgeoning metropolis of Idaho Falls, which is where I spent most of my youth, and really kind of am an accidental lawyer. When I was a senior in high school, a guy named Ryan Nelson, who grew up down the street from me, was doing an internship with, I think, the Senate Chief Counsel during the Clinton impeachment trial. And he came home and talked to our scout troop about his experience in the Senate and in DC. And I said to myself, wow, that sounds really interesting. I think I'd like to visit this Washington, DC someday. And so there was a chance to participate in the Idaho History Day, and if you won, you got to go to DC. And so that was kind of my first trip to Washington, D.C. But really, Ryan Nelson is to blame for me being interested in Washington, D.C. And, my wife and I married when we were both undergrads. I was at the University of Utah. She was at Brigham Young University. She had a degree in Japanese, and I had a degree even less useful in history. And we decided we wanted to move to Washington, D.C. And what do you do in D.C. with a history degree? I guess you go to law school. So I didn't really know anything about lawyers, but I ended up in D.C. and ended up loving law school and loving the ideas of the law, and kind of found my way into being a lawyer more or less on accident.
And just take us through, one, did you join the Federalist Society in law school, or was it later? And then two, after law school, what was your career progression?
So I think I discovered the Federalist Society my third year of law school. When I moved to DC again, my wife and I are both from Idaho. We didn't really have a network of friends or like-minded individuals in the DC area. I found a bunch of really close friends with my co-religionists and got really involved in religious liberty issues my first couple years of law school. And it was a great experience, met wonderful people. And it was a friend at Georgetown who said, hey, aren't you involved in the Federalist Society yet? You seem like you ought to be. And that's when I learned about the Federalist Society. And my third year of law school, I met Greg Maggs, for those of you who know Judge Greg Maggs. And the first time I went into his office as a 3L, he was very upset that his Guinness World Record for largest slide rule had been beaten, and which is the nerdiest possible thing to have a Guinness World Record in. But I found the Federalist Society my third year of law school, and it kind of changed the course of my personal and professional life. Jordan Lawrence at ADF, we were talking in the hallway, and he described coming to Federalist Society conferences as attending family reunions. And that's really the case. The Federalist Society is kind of a found family for me. And every found family has the crazy uncle who has a plane called the Federalist. Where's Jason? But it really does feel like, a family, and it really has been my found family throughout my professional career.
Well, I think that's a story that's common for a lot of people in the room. I think you heard that from Judge Artal, for example. It's true for me as well. I don't go to law school reunions, but I go to the National Lawyers Convention every year, and this convention now, and it feels like a reunion of the people that I, feel some affinity with in the profession. So it sounds like you had that same experience.
And it's you find friends, you find ideas, you find a network of people to help you in your professional life. So I'm trying to remember when we first met, but my first job out of law school was at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Litigation Center. And during the 8 years of the Obama administration, I was very involved in regulatory litigation. So I stole this line from Governor Abbott, then the Attorney General Abbott of the state that's not to be mentioned in these rooms. But he used to say that he would wake up, sue Obama, go to bed, and repeat. And that's really what I did for 8 years at the U.S. Chamber's Litigation Center, is a lot of regulatory litigation in a whole host of different cases. But for every one of those cases, when I needed to find a lawyer to work with, to retain, to help us bring these lawsuits, where did I turn to? I turned to the Federalist Society. When I wanted to work with state AGs and state SGs to partner in these cases with these kind of business and government alliances to challenge these regulations, where did I go? I turned to friends in the Federalist Society who are SGs or working in these AG offices, and made lifelong friends throughout that process. But it's kind of been how I have been successful my entire career, is tapping into all the amazing talent throughout the Federalist Society and working with them to do everything that I've ever accomplished throughout my career.
It's an important point, and I want to get to the rest of your bio, but one of the goals we had when we started this conference was to replicate here the experience I had had in DC, like yours, and what had happened nationally, but certainly in DC, where you had this self-reinforcing network of like-minded lawyers. And part of it was for the judges to make sure that they felt they had support and they could be courageous. But part of it is what you're talking about, which is that we could support each other in the profession and refer cases to each other. And it's a, I think, maybe underappreciated aspect of why we do this and why people should come to this every year and what the society does, aside from the excellent programming. It's the networking piece is very important.
I couldn't agree more. I've described it as the kinetic energy in the hallway of the Mayflower, right? The panels and debates are crucial and important. We're an organization of ideas, first and foremost. No movement can succeed if it's not founded on principles and ideas that matter and that are debated and that are relevant through a long period of time. And that is the starting point. You'll also find at the National Lawyers Convention or at this conference, there are a lot of people in this room. I guarantee during all of those panels, there's lots of people outside. They're milling around, and what happens? A judge who's at the conference bumps into somebody and says, hey, what do you think about so-and-so as a clerk? Can you give a recommendation for me for a good clerk? Or you bump into a friend and you say, hey, I saw that lawsuit that you filed. How did you get around the standing issue? And you kind of cook up the legal ideas, right? We all know that that's a big part of this organization, are those kind of the entropy in the hallway of bumping into each other and sharing ideas and figuring out how to translate ideas that are so important to our organization into action. And that's something that our members in this network do every day. So I love the hallways at every one of our conferences.
For sure. It's sometimes exasperating for the panelists, but it's great for everyone in the hallways. So Sheldon, let's just go back. You were at the chamber. You were there for 8 years. What next? What came next?
So there was an election in 2016, and it seemed like the chamber probably wasn't going to be suing as many federal agencies, which is what I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed suing the government, and there was an organization that I had admired for many years called the Institute for Justice, which, where are my Institute for Justice peeps? Yeah, that table back there. And I love everything about what the Institute for Justice does to fight for the little guy, suing the government. And I was very fortunate to then go work for the Institute for Justice with their think tank, the Center for Judicial Engagement, and work on the ideas around the role of judges and the role of courts, and really be involved in the conservative and libertarian movement in that capacity. And so I had the greatest privilege to work for IJ. And one of my favorite experiences at IJ is it overlapped with the 150th anniversary of the 14th Amendment. And we put together a big conference, which we just stole the model of the Federalist Society, with great voices on every side of the issue, debating issues around the 14th Amendment. I met a lot of great people who are at this conference today. I think Judge Strauss came and spoke. We had a lot of great people there. But it was a fantastic experience exploring ideas and then how those ideas remain relevant today.
And then after IJ?
After IJ,
I'll take you through all of it. So
okay, all right. So we'll just, if you're,
I want to get to know you, and then we'll
you just wanted to get to the part where I hired you as my lawyer.
Well, that was true. That's important.
This is where it's all going to.
I think it's important for people to know your experience before you got into this job.
So after the Institute for Justice, when I was in law school, one of the professors that I really enjoyed is a guy named Jeff Rosen. And they're not the Jeff Rosen who was at DOJ, it's a different Jeff Rosen, very different politics. But Jeff Rosen is someone who is one of the most delightful people to disagree with that you will ever meet. Jeff Rosen takes ideas very seriously, and I got to know him a lot during law school. And he is the CEO of the National Constitution Center, which is a congressionally chartered, nonpartisan platform to teach about the Constitution. It's that big museum right across from Independence Hall. And if you haven't been there, you should. There's this room that has life-size bronze statues of all of the individuals at the Constitutional Convention. And it's remarkable for a lot of reasons, including being able to see just how short many of the founders were. And Never did I feel more like an originalist than the moment when I realized that they were all about my height. But at the National Constitution Center, again, it's an organization that's committed to discussing and debating and exploring ideas about the Constitution. And one of my favorite projects there is we built the nation's first and only permanent exhibit on how the Constitution changed after the Civil War. And there's something remarkable about, being able to see right in front of you Dred Scott's Freedom Petition or John Brown's Pike. The Constitution Center acquired the largest private collection of Civil War artifacts as part of that exhibit. It's a really amazing exhibit. But what I'm really proud of is we incorporated textualism and originalism into the entire exhibit. So if you go in there, there's a display where you can kind of go to the different parts of the 14th Amendment, and you can read through the debates and the text at the time and what the founders of the 14th Amendment were talking about, and explore how the text of what becomes the 14th Amendment changed over time through Congress. You can explore articles in the newspaper in real time and see how those words were used. And it was really important to us as we put together that exhibit to really tell the story through the text and through the understanding at the moment in time when the Reconstruction Amendments were passed. And it was a fantastic experience. A shout out to Professor Kurt Lash, who kind of went around the country transcribing by hand a lot of these Reconstruction era documents that never before had been digitized or made available. He made them available to the National Constitution Center and has made them available online to anybody who wants to access them. But to really be able to encourage originalism, real deep originalism around the Reconstruction Amendments.
Great. There's an aspect of your bio that we might as well get out of the way now, although it's very sensitive for me to talk about.
Here we go again.
It is much reported that you are it goes beyond fandom, that like Christmas dinner at your house might come from the Olive Garden.
Of course.
You love the Olive Garden.
Yes. So does everybody in this room.
And well,
wait till the National Lawyers Convention and it's catered by Olive Garden.
And you see, what I've said to you many times is, when you're talking to a Panuccio, this borders on a hate crime. Say that. It's very sensitive that you're putting that up as the standard for Italian food. But be that as it may, we are in danger of getting free salad and breadsticks for life.
So here's the thing.
Federalist Society.
Okay, so if you go on Twitter, one of the only things you'll find is me very zealously defending Olive Garden. And this is a little bit of my populist instincts as an Idahoan. I remember growing up in Idaho, for a long time, there was this field with a sign that said Olive Garden coming soon. And the city of Idaho Falls, the burgeoning metropolis of Idaho Falls, knew that if we could ever get an Olive Garden, we would have arrived, right? And as a little kid, the closest Olive Garden was Salt Lake City, which is about 3.5-hour drive. And it was the biggest deal ever to save up money and have your family go to the Olive Garden in Salt Lake. And every time someone like Jesse tells me that that's not fancy enough food, my populist Idaho instincts kick in and they say, you know what? Best restaurant ever. And so you'll see a lot of pro Olive Garden propaganda on my Twitter account, to the point that when the news broke, the news leaked about my selection as Federalist Society CEO, I was flooded with texts with 3 questions. Number 1, is it true? Number 2, who's the guy who leaked the news? And number 3, is the Federalist Society now going to have Olive Garden cater the National Lawyers Convention? And somebody put out a tweet that said that the new slogan of the Federalist Society will be limited government, unlimited breadsticks.
Yes, perfect.
And I will point out that the bread at your tables, there was a limited basket there, and it quickly ran out. But my kids and family now have made me a sign for my office at the Federal Society that says limited government, unlimited breadsticks.
Perfect. Fancy's not the issue, let me just be clear. I mentioned at the outset that you have a good memory of this conference. This is a story that I think is pretty great about you and your daughter. wondering if you could just share that with everybody when you came and
Yeah,
what happened at that
absolutely.
conference.
I think I was at the very first Florida statewide chapter. You all launched this chapter at a moment when I was at the U.S. Chamber Litigation Center, which almost never would do amicus briefs in state courts. It's kind of seen like we do U.S. Supreme Court stuff. And, I think that I had a very strong appreciation that the state courts are doing massive amounts of really important, critical work that affects the world in very important ways. And I pushed really hard for us to create a state court program at the U.S. Chamber Litigation Center, where we would file amicus briefs in state courts. And as I, kind of surveyed the country and where we could kind of start this project, the answer I got again and again and again is Florida is a place where you've got good and better by the day judges who are open-minded to ideas, and it's an incredibly important state that has a GDP larger than many countries. And so I went to the first Florida Chapters Conference, and then the second Florida Chapters Conference. And Jason sent me a text the other day. He sent me a picture from the first or second Chapters Conference where I was at one of those microphones getting ready to ask a question. And it was fantastic because you have a group of people who are so dedicated to their state courts, their state constitution, which I think is pivotal in our system of federalism. And I just geeked out over how amazing it was. So your third annual conference, I was scheduled to, I think, speak for IJ at an event. And it overlapped, or actually it was still at the litigation center, but it overlapped with my daughter's 10th birthday, February 5th. And I thought, gosh, I want to go to the conference. I've made it to the first two. I got to keep going. But I don't want to miss my daughter's birthday. And, three really fantastic mentors at the U.S. Chamber Litigation Center, Rachel Brand, Kate Todd, Lily Claffey. And they said, you know what? You don't have to have a conflict between having an amazing career and your family. Take your daughter with you. And so I took my 10-year-old daughter, and I thought, I don't know if she's going to like this. It could be a terrible experience. We did the Disney thing. She then sat through all of the panels. And it turned into one of the best experiences of our relationship, where we talked about the Constitution. We talked about government. We talked about separation of powers. We had an amazing experience together. I've got a picture somewhere. She chased down Justice Lawson to get a picture with him. She chased down Marco Rubio to get a picture with him. And it was an amazing experience for her she's now getting ready to go to college next year. She turns 18 next week. And it's still one of these core memories of our father-daughter relationship. And it's tied to the people in this room who put together an amazing event. And it helped that it was also at Disney World. But I think the Florida Chapters Conference has not just been important to me professionally, but personally, one of my closest memories with my daughter is at this conference.
Well, thanks for that, and I think that is worth a round of applause. I think actually a lot of people in this room and who are at the conference share that. It's always been, and different, I think, from national. It's a family-oriented event. Everyone brings their families. Disney helps. Although it reminds me of when we had Justice Gorsuch a few years ago. I remember at the beginning of the conference, he was, sort of like he was a bit proper, just like, people wanted pictures, and it was sort of like, well, is this going on social media? And then, that was Thursday night. And by the time Saturday night came, when we got to the reception, everyone showed up with their babies, and he was surrounded. It had to be 15, 20 babies. And the next week on LinkedIn, I just saw people posting their pictures of their kids with Justice Gorsuch. And I thought, well, that really took a good turn. That's what we want. It's like, it's a very family-friendly environment. And I think people feel that when they.
Well, first couple days on the job, I think the first day on the job at the Federalist Society, I met one of our staffers, an IT guy named Everett, really terrific, and said, "Tell me about yourself." And he said he was expecting his first baby any day now. Actually, I think the baby was scheduled to be born on Inauguration Day. He lives in D.C., and I said, "Good luck with your traffic, trying to get around." But we were very excited to celebrate that. And my colleague, Peter Redpath, who many of you know, he runs our student division. He has now designed these FedSoc onesies for babies. And
Don't tell Bernie Sanders.
oh, it's amazing. So it's got like a gavel and then a baby rattle, and then it quotes Federalist Paper 1 that one of the benefits of a union well constructed, and he's now made a onesie for Everett, and I'm like, dude, we need like a pile of these. We got to give these out to every FedSoc member who has a baby. So come to me if you've got a new one coming soon, and we'll make sure to get you one of the new onesies. But I really do think that, you know, this taps into something bigger, right? Which is throughout my entire professional career, we talk a lot in places like this about the importance of the Constitution, of separation of powers, of government, of rule of law. One thing that concerns me is how we make sure that those ideas are embraced and appreciated by, you know, children and a younger generation. It's really important for our country to succeed and to persist that that there's a healthy appreciation for just how important the rule of law is and the Constitution is, and how great we have it. The American experiment in democracy and constitutional republic is amazing and exciting, and it expands liberty and the opportunity to flourish. But it only can exist long term if there's an appreciation for how we built this and the importance of the rule of law and government. And that's something that I really want to explore, is how we can make sure that we are translating these ideas into explanations that, you know, we can teach, you know, younger and younger groups of citizens, and really helping the next generation of citizens have that civic virtue that we need as a civilization to exist.
So, Sheldon, you know, turning to the society itself and maybe probing a little bit, you know, it's on its, 26 years now. What was the first quarter century about? And then I want to talk to you a little bit about, you know, your presidency is going to mark a new chapter. So, but just looking back, what do you see the first?
I just want to start with how polite it was of you to talk about a 43-year-old organization as a 25-year-old.
Did I say 20?
Yeah.
43, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what it is? The problem is I'm not accepting aging, and so I just keep everything sort of in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And,
so
you're right. I guess back to the early 80s, yeah.
Yeah, so the Federalist Society was founded in 1982. It will not surprise you as someone who is a student of originalism that as I've stepped into this role, I have gone and searched through newspaper coverage of the Federalist Society for the first 5 years, and really trying to understand the origin story of the Federalist Society. But the origin society, the Federalist Society starts with a group of students at Harvard and Yale and University of Chicago who are really bold and daring students who are saying there's something amiss. We are not hearing conservative ideas about the Constitution in our law schools. If anything, the law schools are hostile to these ideas. And so it's a group of students who band together to create what becomes the Federalist Society. And in fact, one of the favorite articles that I found in the first 5 years of the Federalist Society is a column by the economist Thomas Sowell. And actually, I'm gonna be geeky and read this to you because it's amazing. So the first National Lawyers Convention was 1987. And Thomas Sowell actually spoke at it, and then he wrote about it. And I think this is applicable today. The great thing about originalism is that you find that you poke around in history and you find that these brilliant ideas of the past have salience today. So he said, it is easy to become discouraged and even cynical about the social deterioration and political irresponsibility that plague our country and Western civilization in general. Does that sound like an evergreen statement? But before you give up hope, you might want to attend a meeting of the Federalist Society. My first awareness of the Federalist Society came only last year and has been in existence just 5 years. Yet its meeting in Washington at the end of January attracted speakers at 2 deans of law schools, 5 U.S. Circuit Court judges. I think we had that on one panel. A justice of the California Supreme Court, a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Attorney General of the United States. That's pretty impressive. And then you look at the audience here and you think how much we've developed and grown since then. But here's the paragraph that I like. It is not these dignitaries who are the real cause for hope. However, what is an enormously refreshing and hopeful sign is to see the young people who make up the membership of the Federalist Society. Earnest, intelligent, and unpretentious, these are young men and women of whom any nation and any age could be proud. And that, to me, is the secret sauce of the Federalist Society. It started by students who wanted to be revolutionaries, and they conscripted the people who are older than them and more advanced in their careers to help them be revolutionaries. That's the story of the Federalist Society. So we have a lot of student volunteers here today. Lisa, I don't know if you have a number of how many student volunteers we have, but we have a lot of student volunteers here today. We have over 200 student chapters. And I will say that, like the students in 1982, our law students have spines of steel. They want to do amazing things to advance the conservative and libertarian legal movement. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in the Constitution. They believe in the separation of powers. And what I take from that article from Thomas Sowell in 1987 is that what should make us proud is if we can look at what we accomplished this last year to help the next generation of the people who will be the judges and the heads of all the organizations that are in this room. What have we done this past year to help that next generation be successful and succeed? And that, I think, is what makes the Federalist Society is amazing, is because it starts with the students. And we're really, our job for everybody in this room is to help the students become the next generation of all the amazing jobs that you do today.
You know, I remember when I was a student in the Federalist Society, and some of my mentors were the people who were around in those early days of the chapters. And, you know, they said, you know, back in the early 80s, the idea of originalism or textualism was a joke. I mean, you bring it up in class and it was truly laughed at. And by the time, you know, I was in law school in the early 2000s, it was with the rise of Scalia, it was a very serious part of the debate. The professors were still hostile to it, but it had to, it was in the case books. You had to engage with it. And so I felt like it was really a golden age for the Federalist Society, at least when I was there. The chapters were booming, the conference was great. It was the Bush years. But it always has been a refuge for students of conservative and libertarian leanings on campuses that have been hostile since the 1960s. And you think about all of the success we've had in the Federalist Society over these 40 some odd years. But what's interesting, and you and I were talking about this the other day, is even for all that success, what is the state of law school campuses today? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the law school campus. Again, there are Federalist Society chapters in over 200 schools, law schools across the country. And in some respects, you see an inverse correlation between how successful the ideas of originalism and textualism are, and how hostile some corners of the legal academy are to those ideas and to the students who are inviting speakers to talk about these ideas. So we've made a tremendous amount of progress. If you go look back at 1982, there was a deep concern that there really were no voices on campus talking about these issues. That's not true today. The first week on my job here at the Federalist Society, I attended the Federalist Society Faculty Conference in California and met just an amazing network of conservative and libertarian scholars who are doing amazing research and really providing kind of the intellectual substrate of our entire movement. And that's just something that didn't exist in 1982. That said, that does not mean that it is a friendly environment in every law school. We still have law students who are brave and want to do exciting things, and they want to have debate and discussion, and they want ideas debated and explored. But it can be a pretty challenging environment in many of the schools today. And I think particularly in the last 2 years, we've seen a number of troubling incidents in the law schools of attempts to shout down speakers and to intimidate our students. And so I don't think that the problem is solved yet. If anything, I think that it means that everybody in this room needs to double down their support for the law student chapters. And, when you have judges and others serving as adjunct faculty in these schools, often they're the only ones who are providing courses on textualism and originalism, and providing a voice for the students, for example. When you have a lawyers chapter president in a city where there's a law school with no faculty on campus, it matters so much that lawyers chapter president is very involved with the student chapter president. And I was talking with Lisa about this, and she gave me a list off the top of her head of all of these amazing lawyer chapter presidents, many of whom are in this room right now, who are doing amazing work with the students directly to try and make sure that they have a great law school experience where they're connected to the ideas and they're connected with a network of people who can help them when there are difficult situations. So I just am really proud of all of the stories that I've heard of our lawyer chapters and our judges and others reaching out to our students, just as crucial as the faculty who are on these campuses at helping our students, because it's genuinely a really tough environment at a lot of our schools.
Yeah, and especially in recent years with some of it's no longer shout downs, it's actual violence to shut down speech on campuses. We've seen some of that, and I know you've heard tell of some stories where students had to actually have physical bravery to get their ideas out on campus.
It's kind of a piece with something that Judge Thapar was talking about last night when we talk about judicial independence and judicial legitimacy. Going back to, again, the origin story of the Federalist Society, if you go to the mission statement of the Federalist Society, it talks about the principles of the Federalist Society, and some of the principles that the Federalist Society is committed to is separation of powers. And it is emphatically the duty of judges to say what the law is and not what it should be. To me, those are both fundamentally about judicial independence and judicial legitimacy, right? You cannot have healthy separation of powers without two things. Number one, you have to have the branches staying in their lanes. And number two, each branch needs to be healthy and each branch needs to be respected, right? And I am really, troubled by, some of the examples that you heard last night of even threats of violence to judges. I think that is a danger to the rule of law. It's a danger to the separation of powers. Judges should not have to experience that. It threatens legitimacy and independence. And it's the same thing in the schools. And I think that the question then is, what's the solution to challenges like this? I think part of it is exactly what the Federalist Society does. There's a lost art to disagreeing without being disagreeable, right? I was delighted when I saw on Twitter Senator McCormick and Senator Fetterman tweet out that they went on a double date with their wives. You have, a Republican and a Democrat, and they're going out in a social outing together, and they tweeted it out, and they all looked happy and like they had a good time. Pretty confident they don't agree on a lot of things. Similarly, I think the model of, Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia is just a really terrific and admirable one. And Chris Scalia talks about a story he heard from Chief Judge Sutton. And I'll probably get the specifics wrong, but as I recall, Chief Judge Sutton was visiting Justice Scalia's chambers on Justice Ginsburg's birthday. And Justice Scalia had 24 roses in his office ready to take to Justice Ginsburg. And as the story goes, Judge Sutton teased Justice Scalia a bit and said, it's a lot of roses for, someone who's, going to vote 5-4 and is not going to vote for you. And Justice Scalia said, some things are more important than a vote. And you can be principled. And Chris Scalia says, look, my dad and Justice Ginsburg were very principled individuals. They did not back down from their principles. Full stop. At the same time, Justice Scalia took 24 roses to Justice Ginsburg on her birthday. And that, I think, is a powerful example. So part of it is that. Part of it is dealing with and addressing the incentives and really empowering students to be able to respond in situations like this, not backing down when these situations arise. But I think we need to think about the toolkit that we need as a civilization and as a society to make sure that we can have respectful dialogue and debate and disagreement on campus, that we can have respectful dialogue and debate and disagreement within the judiciary and with respect to the judiciary. And that's an essential ending place where we need to be. And I think that, I am optimistic that the American experience will endure another 250 years, so we're going to get it right. But I think it's something that takes a lot of effort to make sure that we ensure that the environment is such that, we have a healthy respect for the judiciary as one of the three branches of government, that we respect independence and legitimacy, that we have a healthy respect for different ideas on campus. It just takes a lot of work to get there.
Let me shift focus a little bit. So we were just talking about the law school campus, one of the main institutions for lawyers when they're starting their career. But we eventually all leave, and our law schools become a memory, and in many ways, the institution in law that we spend the least time at. We go out into the world, we become lawyers at law firms, and some go in-house, and they're at corporations, some go into government. But I want to focus on those two institutions, which would be corporate America and let's call it big law America. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because we have these lawyers chapters that serve many of the same functions as the student chapters. What are your thoughts on the current state of corporate America for conservatives and libertarians, especially lawyers? You have a lot of experience at the chamber and elsewhere, seeing up close and personal. The world is changing a little bit now in the last few months. It's been somewhat remarkable to see corporate CEOs show up at Mar-a-Lago and change their attitude. It was very different in 2017. So I'm wondering what your thinking is. And on top of that, and relevant to this, what role is the Federalist Society playing in helping reshape some of those attitudes and be a supportive network for lawyers in those environments? Well,
as a first matter, I do think your observation about what our students do after they leave law school, there's lots of different paths that our students might take, including government, including corporations, but including a lot of the cause organizations that are part of our movement. You have lots of different groups here. I see there, a continuum of people's experience within the conservative and libertarian, legal movement. You start with the law schools where, that's really where, students get excited about our ideas and kind of start getting involved. But for individuals who start to be excited by those ideas at law school, for them to continue throughout that career and to be involved in the movement, they need a few other things. They need to, meet other people in the movement. They kind of need a network and a mentor. They need to be constantly exposed to the ideas. So it's important that, activities like this exist throughout people's careers, and need a responsibility, some way that they can continue to help within the movement. And there are lots of ways that happens. So I think it's really important to kind of appreciate the variety of ways in which our members are contributing to society and the legal order. On corporate America, look, I've spent, again, the entirety of the Obama years working with corporate America while at the U.S. Chambers Litigation Center, the entirety of the Biden years. I think that in 2021, the National Lawyers Convention had a Rosencrantz debate that I would encourage everyone to go revisit if you didn't have a chance to watch it at the time, or if you haven't reviewed it recently. But it was a debate between, I believe, Ashley Keller and John Allison about a lot of these issues about corporations and the term, woke corporations. And I can't remember the exact title of the Rosencrantz debate, but it was something to the effect of whether corporations or government are a greater threat to liberty today in 2021. And it's a really robust debate with a lot of really interesting observations, both from Ashley and from John Allison, about the state of corporate America, about the various pressures that exist in corporate America, pushing in particular directions. So I would refer you to that debate as a really good discussion of that. There are some anecdotes from the debate that stick out in my mind and I remember really well. So one of the moments in the debate, John Allison, who is previously the CEO of BB&T Bank, he tells this story where he and his bank very much opposed the TARP bank bailouts and publicly opposed them, as I recall from his story. And he got a call from a government official who said, look, your bank is healthy, but we want this program to succeed by conscripting, the healthy banks in with the troubled banks so that we can kind of mix those assets together. And we think that we need to do that for it to succeed. And here's the next part of the conversation. He said that the government official said, I've got a lot of auditors and inspectors that are going to go visit your banks, and I'm confident we will find a problem. And I'm just letting you know that we will find a problem if we go and look at you. And he said, gosh, well, we don't want that to happen. How do we, prevent that from happening? Not that his company did anything wrong. It's just that with any large entity, you can always find a mistake somewhere. And he said that the government official responded, there's an easy way to make this go away. You can participate in the TARP program. And he said, when you're a CEO and you have that kind of government pressure behind closed doors, which is not exactly the type of thing that you can bring a lawsuit to address. It'll often be referred to as not final agency action. The legal process is going to be really slow. You've got a threat behind closed doors in that moment that has to be addressed and decided. And his company, he said his company had to make a decision. We'll fast forward to more recent times, and you see, for example, Mark Zuckerberg issuing a letter talking about the pressure that he felt behind closed doors to adopt certain positions with respect to speech. And so I think you see these stories out there, and I love that we hosted that Rosencrantz debate because it was a great way to be able to discuss these stories, to debate and discuss, how big of a problem this is and what are the potential solutions. And I think that what is happening in the last few months is a lot of these debates and discussions that were happening in nerdy places like a National Lawyers Convention in 2021 at the Federalist Society are kind of bursting into the front page of the newspaper. And I like to think that the Federalist Society was ahead of the curve in hosting debates on this topic and really trying to engage with the issues in corporate America and the relationship with government and all these other pressures out there. But I think that's what you're seeing a lot of these issues that have been behind closed doors and people have talked about, and they're getting more and more attention, and now they're bursting out into public as people are really debating and discussing a lot of these issues about the proper role of corporations, what drives corporations to engage in some of the activities that they engage in, what are the legal pressures, what are the private pressures, what are the pressures that are emerging on the other side to kind of push back in another direction. And that's something that I think we at the Federalist Society can do to be very helpful to the general public on this, is to continue to host these discussions and debates precisely on these topics so that they can be aired in the fresh light of day. And I think that that's really healthy.
Great. Well, we're getting to the end of our time, so I want to close out with two questions. One, I think a lot of people in this room are interested. There's change in administration. First time in a very long time we've had a president with a break in terms. But one of the hallmarks of the first Trump administration was the incredible influence he had on the federal judiciary. There are judges in this room who were appointed by President Trump in term one. And of course, he had just a huge swath of appointments from the Supreme Court on down. What do you see in the second term? Not as many vacancies available, but what do you think? Do you think we're going to see a different kind of judge appointed? Do you think the president will have similar influence on the future of the federal judiciary?
I will tell you that I'm an ideas guy. I love the ideas of originalism and textualism. I love that they have taken purchase, not just among Federalist Society types, but across the academy and across the judiciary. You know, whatever type of judge you are, you have to seriously engage with textualism and originalism as the principal framework that is used in kind of a principled way to interpret texts, whether it's the Constitution or other texts. And I am very heartened and optimistic because that is the paradigm to beat now, from my perspective. And look, I think that the president has now the largest network in history of amazing individuals with proven track records and thinking on these important ideas and issues. So there's no end of the number of really amazing and impressive individuals who have shown exactly what it's like to be a textualist and originalist. The pool is just huge, and that's really because of the network of people, you know, in this room. The work that you all are doing every day, whether it's in state courts or in federal courts, to build the ideas and to make sure that that people are, you know, have a mentor and learn about originalism and textualism. Those ideas have succeeded and gotten purchased because of the terrific network of people in this room and rooms like this across the country. So I think that there's just a tremendous pool of talent out there, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. But you know, I think that you saw during the first Trump administration, you saw a lot of really remarkable, talented individuals who are committed to the rule of law, who are committed to the separation of powers, who have a principled approach to judging, who believe that their job is to say what the law is, not what it should be. And it's really, you know, a hallmark of you know, a successful approach to the judiciary. That first administration, I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Thanks for that. Let me ask you, last question. I think you, of the people I've met in this space, I think you have a real expertise on state AG offices and how they operate. And you're a strategic thinker about that from your time in corporate America and dealing with AG investigations and everything else. But you said something interesting at the beginning, and I want to tie back to that. I think you said when then Texas AG Abbott said, you know, I wake up, I sue the Obama administration, I go to bed, rinse, repeat the next morning. There are some people in this room who work in state government, work for state AGs, in red states, obviously, you know, for this room. And you know, now we have a Republican president with conservative ideals, and so those state AGs who were, you know, it always flips. Now the blue states do. What, if any, ideas do you have? What should red state AGs, conservative AGs, be focusing on when they are in agreement with the federal government on most things? Do you have any ideas about staffers in this room who might work in those environments in state government? Where would you, if you were in that position, where would you be spending your time now?
My hunch is that red state AGs will find no end of projects to keep themselves busy. Look, I love federalism. I love you know, dynamic state. I love, you know, dynamic states. I love exploring state constitutions. It's one of my favorite topics in the world. In fact, that's a, you know, discussion for another day, but one of the things that we're thinking about at the Federalist Society right now is we've done such an amazing job as a movement in encouraging discussion and debate and research on the US Constitution and providing kind of the intellectual substrate for everything that you need to do to be an originalist when it comes to the federal Constitution. The next challenge is that a lot of these issues are moving into state courts under state constitutions, and you need originalism for the states. And just the reality is that all of that historical research and academic research has not yet been done for many of the state constitutions out there. In fact, in a lot of circumstances, you have to physically go to an archive somewhere in the state and find these original source documents to be able to even do the type of originalism that you might see with respect to the federal Constitution. So, you know, as a little bit of a tangent, would love to talk to anybody who's interested in this issue of originalism for the states, and particularly originalism with respect to the Florida Constitution and how the Florida state courts are approaching that. That's a conversation that I invite after this call. But the reality is that a lot of these issues that have been in the federal courts are moving into state courts, or they're in state courts and federal courts. And I suspect that a lot of state AGs will be spending their time over the next few years playing defense a little bit, as you know, they face lawsuits in their own state courts and under their own state constitutions. So I suspect that state AGs will spend a lot of time playing defense. I also suspect that you'll continue to see this phenomenon that I think needs to be explored more with respect to kind of the health of state sovereignty. You know, traditionally, when we think about what makes states healthy and federalism and state sovereignty, you know, Federalist Society hosts debates about how, and discussions about how the federal government is chipping away at state authority, right? So you've got kind of pressure from the top squeezing out the states. That's a frequent topic of conversation at Federalist Society events. In the last decade or 2 decades, particularly the last decade, you also have this phenomenon of states getting squeezed from the bottom by their own municipalities and political subdivisions, right? So I think something that we need to talk about more, and that I suspect a lot of state AGs will be involved in, is you know, even if there's less pressure coming from above from the federal government, you know, if that turns out to be true, at the same time, I suspect that there will be pressure coming from the bottom up, from political subdivisions within those states. And that also needs to be addressed with the question and the discussion and the debate about, wait a second, how do the political subdivisions fit in with the notions of state sovereignty embodied in our US Constitution, but also in state constitutions? So I suspect that the state AGs will get sued a fair amount, and they will be defending their government agencies. That just happens every day. Some people in this room will probably file lawsuits against state governments for different things, and so the state AGs are going to be plenty busy playing defense. I also think that they're probably going to be involved in a lot of these issues, exploring exactly what state sovereignty means at a moment in time when political subdivisions are flexing their muscles in ways that that start to affect what it means to have state power. So I think they'll stay pretty busy.
Thanks for that. Before I close out, I should probably give, are you going to give reminders at the end, or do you want me? Okay, so I'll invite Lisa back up, but to close out our conversation first, let me say again on behalf of everyone who is a Federalist Society member in Florida, congratulations on becoming the 2nd president of the Federalist Society. We are really excited for what you're going to do for the organization as a whole, for our chapters in this state. Everybody, please give a round of applause to Sheldon Gilbert.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks.